In San Francisco, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up in the next hour, Intel's earnings miss. The chipmaker reports weaker than expected results and warns it is cautious going forward. Plus, our exclusive conversation with the Chan of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. Priscilla Chan joins us to talk about why they're backing a massive new housing fund in San Francisco. And the U.S. government has long feared Huawei is a Trojan horse for Chinese intelligence. Now the Trump administration is stepping up actions against the Chinese telecom. But first to our top story, shares of Intel plunging in after-hours trading after the company posted a fourth quarter revenue miss. The stock fell by as much as 7% after the chipmaker's revenue and earnings both fell short of analyst estimates. And to make matters worse, Intel's revenue forecast for the current quarter is below estimates as well. To discuss, we've got Bloomberg Opinion's Shira Ovide in New York, and with me here in the studio, Nico Grant, Bloomberg Technology. So, Nico, analysts were actually optimistic about Intel's results. What went wrong here?
Yeah, so this has not been a good day for Intel, which really ended this year, which has been quite a boom from a financial standpoint, on a sour note. Basically, the expectation was that the company's data center business would slow down, but analysts didn't expect it would slow down by this much. And so basically, Intel supplies processors for data centers that companies like Amazon, Microsoft, and Alphabet have been using for the last half decade plus, in the case of Amazon, more than a decade, in order to build out these massive data centers around the world for cloud computing. Those companies now have stockpiled those resources. Intel's interim CEO, Bob Swan, tells Bloomberg. And so they're not going to build at that same rate going forward because they have the infrastructure.
So one of the issues is they don't have a CEO. They have an interim CEO. They're looking for a CEO. Shira, we'll get to that. But let's talk a little bit about the existential crisis that Intel finds itself in right now. It's groundbreaking new technology. The 10-nanometer chip technology has been delayed as the company is trying to expand into new businesses where competitors have a strong foothold.
Yeah, this is obviously a company that could use a CEO. It's really at a crossroads. As you mentioned, they've had some production hiccups, and Intel is sort of no longer the world's leader in making the sort of fastest, most efficient chips in the world. And, that's quite a psychic blow for a company like Intel that really kind of invented the semiconductor industry. And at the same time, right, they have these macro conditions, issues in China with global trade that they sort of said deteriorated in the last few months. And that's one reason why Intel's forecast for the first quarter and for all of 2019 is a lot weaker than investors expected. So all issues that the new boss, whenever he or she lands, is going to have to deal with.
So the boss, for the meantime, is the interim CEO, Bob Swan, who's also the CFO. Nico, what progress report did we get on the call about the CEO search from him?
So the call is happening right now. We'll sort of see what he says, but he told our Ian King, who's our Intel reporter, basically that the board continues to search for a CEO. We also reported recently that the Intel board has decided against some of the candidates who were, traditional candidates that they might have considered. Others declined to be considered for the role, and the most we have at this point is they may choose someone, quote unquote, unconventional, which means that the person may come from outside of the company, which is unusual.
We've actually got a great chart of the folks who are no longer in the running. And what's interesting, Shira, about the CEO search, there are no real front runners that we know of, that Ian King knows of, who's been covering chips for 2 decades. Why?
Well, I will say that CEO searches are a messy process, right? That somebody who was a front runner one second might not be the next. But it's also true that under the last few years at Intel, some of the kind of obvious internal candidates who might be appropriate for the CEO, people like Diane Bryant, people like Renee James, they left the company in part because of leadership changes that Brian Krzanich, the former CEO, had made. And so that left the bench a little bit thin. So, as Nico pointed out, Intel is in this unusual position for a company that has always groomed successors from inside the company and was proud of doing so. There is not really an obvious Intel executives to promote.
So, Nico, talk to us about the broader challenges that whoever the next CEO is will face.
Right. So there's the one that we've mentioned already, which is basically that TSMC, a Taiwanese competitor that, a company like Intel, which is so prestigious, might have looked down upon once upon a time, can now do 10 nanometer chips and is making Intel's rival AMD, which also competes in the computer space, very competitive against Intel. We also have a situation right now in which there have been supply shortages from Intel's end, and that has been compromising the computer industry. Desktops and laptops have been growing at a slower rate, in part because of less demand, and in part because they're not getting those chips from Intel, and Intel has been prioritizing the higher capacity ones for more expensive machines rather than cheaper ones. And so, it seemed like it was a great year financially when you looked at the third quarter and you saw 26% growth for the data center business, and it was incredibly lucrative. And now with this slowdown, it's really clear that, Bob Swan or someone really has to assert themselves.
There's also, Shira, broader macroeconomic issues going on. A trade war, a smartphone slowdown, an iPhone sale slowdown, and Intel, wasn't the first to mobile chips, but, the broader chip industry is riding on the health of this overall ecosystem. What does that mean for Intel?
Yeah, look, the chip industry in general is one of the most globally interconnected industries in the world. And so it is really a big blow for companies like Intel and others. They're not in a unique position to have this kind of trade war going on between the U.S. and China. It kind of hurts them on both sides, right? Both their China customers might be feeling the pain from slowdowns in economic growth in that country, and Intel also has to deal with how to figure out the supply chain and tariffs that are applied on the U.S. end. So, yeah, it's a really difficult condition for this company. At the same time, right, they're kind of global, their economic slowdowns in large pockets of the world, China, Europe, other places, and that hurts them too, right? This is kind of an industry that's exposed to economic growth and the vagaries of the global economy.
All right, Shira Ovide and Nico Grant for Bloomberg. Thanks so much for that update. Be sure to tune in to Bloomberg Friday morning. We've got our interview with Intel interim CEO Bob Swan. Meantime, the president has been speaking at the White House. We are waiting for that tape, and we'll play it back for you momentarily. Also, coming up, Facebook is shutting down its private photo sharing app, Moments, next month. We will have more on that story coming up later in the show. This is Bloomberg. Facebook shutting down its private photo sharing app Moments next month. The social media giant confirmed that the app services will end February 25th. It's failed to gain popularity. The app was first introduced in 2015 as a way for people to share photos without posting directly on Facebook. Users will have until May to download or transfer their photos before they disappear entirely. Well, OpenX maintains one of the world's largest digital ad exchanges with over 34,000 advertisers. Thursday, the company announced a new partnership with Google that will make it a full-time cloud-based service. The $110 million 5-year deal will move the entire OpenX exchange into the Google Cloud platform, essentially removing the need for OpenX's own servers. To discuss, we've got OpenX CEO Tim Cadigan with us from New York. So, Tim, Google is a competitor of yours because they've got their own ad marketplace. So why go to the Google Cloud versus Microsoft or AWS?
Hi, Emily. Thanks for having me. So just quickly to kind of level set, we run, as you said, one of the largest ad exchanges, which means we process over a trillion transactions a day. So the volume that we're working with is huge. And as we started to think about all of the new innovation we want to bring to the market over the next couple of years, that's going to require even more computing power, and we need that computing power to be extremely efficient. So we started to map out a path to move to the public cloud, which is GCP or Amazon. We really wanted to focus on a system that would give us an incredible amount of scale and enable us to innovate at a rate that would really make a difference in the industry, and not to have to continue to work on a lot of the maintenance of our own infrastructure that we had to do with our own servers. An example of how important this is moving to 5G. When consumers start to move to 5G on their phones and have a very, very rapid experience, the advertising experience needs to be incredibly compelling. And we wanted to make sure that we could run on the infrastructure there. So,
why choose Google?
With regard to Google, so that's kind of why we wanted to move to the public cloud. With Google, what you have is you have one of the largest, really the largest advertising infrastructure in the world, and they do a lot of the foundational work that we can build on top of. The other thing to bear in mind about Google is they're a multi-dimensional company. So they are, you're right, they're a competitor to us.
I'm going to have to let you go. We are getting tape from President Trump, who's been speaking at the White House. Let's listen in.
What's the idea of the temporary spending money to reopen the government?
Well, one of the ideas suggested is they open it, they pay a sort of a prorated down payment for the wall, which I think people will agree that you need. You need the wall. In fact, I see a lot of the Democrats almost all of them are breaking, saying, look, walls are good, walls are good. Big difference from what you had 2 or 3 weeks ago. And we had the vote on our bill, which we won 50 to 47. That was our bill. But we got one Democrat. It was 50 to 47. We need, as you know, we have to get 60. We don't have 60 votes, so we need Democrat support. We didn't get Democrat support other than from a actually wonderful man, as you know, Senator Manchin, and who's doing the right thing for his people. I mean, he's doing the right thing for West Virginia, frankly. And the other bill, it was 52-44, and that included a lot of hurricane relief for a lot of different states. So it's sort of not something, some of them really voted for the hurricane relief, which they felt they needed. That was 52-44. But you need 60, so that didn't go anywhere. So we knew they both were not going to go anywhere, we thought. And now Mitch is negotiating with Chuck Schumer, and we'll see what happens. I think they just left a meeting. They just had a meeting. I think they're going out to see their people, but they just left. So we had 2 bills. I think we did very well. The Republicans held, except for 2. The Republicans held. 2 were not there. They weren't able to be there. So there were 2 non-votes. But even with 2 non-votes, I think they would have been good votes for us. It's 50 to 47. We won. But we need 60 votes because of the 60-vote rule. And so I just really want to thank the Republicans for holding. Again, on the other one, that was the opening up. That's 52-44, but you need 60 votes, so it's a long way short. And a lot of those votes were based on the fact that there was hurricane relief for certain states.
But would you also be able to temporary spending without money for the wall? Would you just to reopen the
Well, I wouldn't be happy with it. I wouldn't be happy. But we have a lot of alternatives. Honestly, we have everybody. Look, for the most part, people agree. When I say everybody, I would say almost everybody agree. We have to have border security. We have to have a wall in order to have border security. You cannot have border security without a wall. I mean, we can play games and we can talk about technology. We can talk about drones flying around. You know, right now, formed is an 8,000-person caravan. And the caravan is heading our way. Congratulations. We have another one. We stopped the first one. We stopped the second one. I wouldn't say that Tijuana is too happy, but they're happily living in Tijuana right now. And a lot of them have gone back. But we stopped them. But it's very tough. And if we didn't have a wall in those areas, it would have been very hard to stop them. We have the military and we have the Border Patrol. They've done an incredible job. And ICE has done an incredible job all over the country, frankly. We've removed thousands of MS-13 and others out of our country. But if we had a wall, we wouldn't have that problem. It would be great. So we have a lot of alternatives. But I'm just honored that almost all of the Republicans voted for our bill. Our bill is the bill that we were really focused on. But we had almost all of the Republicans. So the end result was 50 to 47. The Democrats lost one that came over to our side. So they pretty much held, and we held, And again, we were missing 2 Republicans. They couldn't vote. They were not here.
Mr. President, do you support the results? Is there enough movement to end the shutdown soon, or are we going to see it?
Well, I have to find out. After this meeting, we'll find out. But right now, Mitch McConnell's meeting with Chuck Schumer, and Steve, they'll have to see what happens. They're meeting to see if they can work out something, maybe on a temporary basis where we start. But we have a lot of alternatives. There are a lot of people that want this to happen. I'll tell you who wants this to happen. The military wants this to happen, because this is a virtual invasion of our country, of drugs, of human traffickers, of so many different things, of criminals. It's an invasion of our country. And the military wants this to happen, and the Border Patrol wants this to happen. And by the way, Border Patrol said all of the drones flying up in the air, having a lot of fun flying drones all over the place. They don't mean a thing when they look down and they see thousands of people rushing our border. The only thing that works is a strong barrier or wall.
Have you talked to Nancy Pelosi?
I have not. I haven't spoken to Nancy Pelosi, no. No, but I'm here, I haven't left except for a beautiful evening in Iraq. I've been here for a long time.
Mr. President, did you see Wilbur Ross said that he doesn't understand why federal workers would need help getting food? Can you understand?
No,
why?
I haven't heard the statement, but I do understand. Perhaps he should have said it differently. Local people know who they are when they go for groceries and everything else. And I think what Wilbur is probably trying to say is that they will work along. I know banks are working along. If you have mortgages, the mortgagees, the folks collecting the interest and all of those things, they work along. And that's what happens in time like this. They know the people. They've been dealing with them for years, and they work along. The grocery store. And I think that's probably what Wilbur Ross meant. But I haven't seen his statement, no. But he's done a great job. I will tell you that. Yes?
Venezuela, I just want to know, aren't you worried to leave the American diplomats behind?
Well, we're looking at Venezuela. It's a very sad situation. That was the richest state in all of that area. That's a big, beautiful area, and by far the richest. And now it's one of the poorest places in the world. That's what socialism gets you, when they want to raise your taxes to 70%. It's interesting. I've been watching our opponents, our future opponents, talking about 70%. Number one, they can't do it for 70%. It's got to be probably twice that number. But maybe more importantly, what happens is you really have to study and take a look at what's happened to Venezuela. It is a very, very sad situation. So we have our eye very closely on Venezuela, very closely.
Mr. President, if Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer can come to some sort of agreement, will you support the results of this?
Well, it depends what the agreement is. I mean, yeah, but if they come to a reasonable agreement, I would support it. Yeah.
Even if it has no wall money? Or does it have to have wall money?
I only, look, I have other alternatives if I have to, and I'll use those alternatives if I have to. We want to go through the system. We have to have a wall in this country. We have criminals pouring into our country. And I'm not talking about the southern border. They don't stay there. They go through, they permeate all throughout the country, including places like Wisconsin, a lot of different places. And that's the problem. I say that we would cut our crime. We're doing very well on crime rate compared to past years and past administrations. But I think our crime rate would go way down. And I know our drug rates, what's happening is the drugs are pouring in. And yes, they come through the ports of entry, but the big trucks come through areas where you don't have a wall and you have wide open spaces. We have to have the wall. You'd stop drugs. You'd stop human trafficking. I mean, human trafficking where they tie up women and they put duct tape on their mouths and they put them in the back seat of a car or in a van. They don't come through a port of entry because the people at the port of entry are going to see that. That's not like hiding drugs in the engine or in the hubcaps, and they have incredible, ingenious ideas. I mean, frankly, I've said some of these people are so genius. If they were ever legit, they'd become very rich people. But what they do is they go through the ports of entry with small stuff. But the big stuff comes through areas where you have nobody watching. I mean, you have hundreds of miles of open space, and they go out there, and they're loaded up with drugs, or they have women in the backseat of the cars with duct tape all over the place. It's a disgrace. And you don't catch them. They make a left. You don't even know the difference between Mexico and the United States. They make a left turn after they go out 20 miles, 40 miles, 5 miles in some cases and less. They make a left turn. They're in the United States. And then they do whatever they have to do. You need the wall. And we can all play games and we can all talk about technology. I know more about technology than anybody. If you don't have the wall, the technology doesn't work. First of all, the wall is based on, it's all based, any technology works only with the wall. Not going to work otherwise. You need the wall. In fact, a lot of the technology is put on top of the wall. That's how you see it, the cameras and everything else. They literally put the technology, they fasten it to the wall. Then you have drone technology, and that's great. In terms of what are you going to do? You're going to follow the people? First of all, once they step into the country, you know what happens, right? You know what they do. It's called, what do they call it, you know? They put 1 foot in our country, right? And we got them. That's it. So the drones don't help us. We have to keep it out. We have no choice but to have a wall or a barrier. And if we don't have that, it's just not going to work. So it's very important to me. All right, one more question.
What's your message to federal workers who are missing another paycheck this week?
I love them. I respect them. I really appreciate the great job they're doing. Many of those people that are not getting paid are totally in favor of what we're doing because they know the future of this country is dependent on having a strong border, especially a strong southern border, because we have tremendous violence and crime coming through that border. We have tremendous drugs. We have the human trafficking. We have MS-13 and gangs pouring through those borders. And if we don't strengthen those borders, we're going to have a big problem in the future. One of the people I blame is myself, because the economy is so strong right now, stronger than ever before. Today, right now, we have more people working in the United States than has ever worked in this country before. That's a great compliment. So I blame myself, okay? But the fact is, people come up because our country is doing so well, and they want to break through our borders. The fact is, we want them to come up. We took in more people last year legally than we have in a long time. Because we need them, because we have a lot of companies are coming into our country. So we need people coming in. I want people to come in, but they have to come in legally, and they have to come in through merit. They have to be able to help companies. And if they don't help companies, and if they don't help our country, we can't do that, folks. We just can't do that, right?
Why did you decide to agree to Nancy Pelosi there?
Well, it's really her choice. I would have done it in a different location, but I think that would be very disrespectful to the State of the Union to pick some other place. I could have done it. I could have gone to a big auditorium and gotten 25,000 people in one day, and you've been there many times. But I think that would be very disrespectful to the State of the Union. So what she said, I thought, was actually reasonable. We'll have the State of the Union when the shutdown is over.
And when do you think that's going to be?
That I can't tell you. But we have a lot of alternatives, but we need border security. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Thanks, everybody.
President Trump speaking there moments ago at the White House, saying he would not be happy with a stopgap measure that lacks wall funding, says he would be open to an agreement between the Democrats and the Republicans, depending on what that agreement is. But when he was asked if that agreement didn't include wall funding, he said, well, he has other alternatives. Our Bloomberg reporter, Tolu Olorunnipa, joins us now from Washington. Tolu, what are the highlights from what you heard there?
Yeah, it sounds like we are continuing the position of a stalemate that we were in when we first started the shutdown. The president is saying that he needs a wall. He just heard that the Senate voted twice on 2 different bills. One Republican bill supported by the president, one Democratic bill supported by the Democratic leader, and both bills failed. And actually, the Democratic bill actually got more votes than the president's bill, showing how far we are from a solution to this shutdown. The president seemed to spin that and say that, they got enough votes, but they need more Democratic support for his proposal, and saying that he needs a wall. And then right now, senators are trying to come up with a short-term plan to maybe open the government for a few weeks at a time and then work out a broader deal. But the president is saying he would only sign that if he gets a down payment on the wall. Now, we don't know how much money that would require, but it's showing a sign that Democrats and Republicans are coming together trying to figure out a short-term deal. But the president is a wild card there. He's someone who has said that he has to have at least something for the wall before he opens up the government. And Democrats have not been able or willing to put that money on the table for the wall, and it doesn't appear that we're getting any closer to finding a solution that the president can support. So we're waiting to find out whether or not the president will move from his position of having to have some money for a wall before opening up the government, and whether or not we'll get to a point where Democrats and Republicans decide that they have to move forward without the president and maybe even put together a veto-proof majority to come up with some sort of deal to bring relief to 800,000 workers who have been working so far without pay for more than a month now.
Right. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer did meet earlier today to talk about this. There was some glimmer of hope there that, there would be some progress for the first time over these long 34 days. That said, when Trump says he has other alternatives, if he doesn't like an agreement that they make, what are those other alternatives? He's already said he's not going to declare a national emergency.
Yeah, it's hard to tell. This is something that the president and the administration have been talking about for more than a month. Even before the shutdown, they said that they were asking the various agencies to look through their budgets and find out whether or not they had extra money that they could use to build the wall. Nothing has come of that yet, and a lot of these agencies are now actually looking through their budgets just to stay open because the government shutdown has lasted so long that there's not enough money to not only not pay workers, but also just keep the lights on and make sure that they're paying for leases and paying for utilities. A lot of these agencies are saying that they may have to completely actually shut down if there is no extra funding and if the government isn't open in the next few weeks here. So it's not clear where the president is looking to find extra money to build the wall that he's talking about. The national emergency idea that he floated a few weeks ago has not really gone anywhere yet. It's not clear that he's going to revisit that because it could end up getting tied in the court. So we haven't really found any information from the administration about how they would have alternatives, and if they did have alternatives, it's not clear why they haven't used it. We're several weeks into the shutdown, and if they were going to use an alternative option, they have had plenty of time to come up with one, and we haven't seen it yet. So the president has said that he has an alternative, but we just haven't yet seen anything that would open up the government or that would fund the wall, and right now we continue to be at a stalemate.
House Speaker Nancy Pelosi sounded just as resolute this morning when talking about not changing their position. If Democrats and Republicans were to move forward without the president, what would that look like?
Yeah, it would look like a pretty embarrassing situation for the president, who has been very obstinate in saying that he has to have this wall or else he's going to keep the government shut down. This would be a major break with Republicans leaving the president. We haven't seen that in his first 2 years in office, and we haven't seen it very often, only on a couple of different occasions on some foreign policy issues. But if it would take a veto-proof majority, basically, to defy the president and pass a bill to open up the government, it's not yet clear that we're there yet. Democrats are on board with passing a clean funding bill. We did see some Republicans, about 6 Republicans in the Senate, cross over and agree with the Democrats to open up the government with a clean bill. But you would need at least a dozen more Republicans to cross the aisle and vote with Democrats. And you would need the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, who so far has been supporting the president. You'd need him to break with the president and put a bill on the floor that would get to the president's desk and defy his threat to veto any bill that does not have wall funding. So we seem to be pretty far from that, but we are hearing that a number of senators are fed up with the fact that the government has been shut down so far. And that's why you saw 6 Republican senators, even some that support the president very strongly, cross party lines and vote against the president to open up the government without adding money for the wall.
Day 34 with no end in sight, the longest government shutdown in modern U.S. history. Bloomberg's Tolu Oluronapa, thank you so much for that analysis there from Washington. We'll keep covering this. Coming up, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative is tackling the Bay Area's housing crisis. Founder Priscilla Chan tells us about the new investment fund that Chan Zuckerberg, Facebook, and Genentech are backing. This is Bloomberg. The Philanthropy started by Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and wife Priscilla Chan is backing a fresh effort to address the housing shortage in the San Francisco Bay Area, where an explosion of tech wealth has exacerbated inequality and an affordability crisis. The median price of a home in San Francisco is now $1.6 million. Chan and Zuckerberg are now backing a massive $500 million investment fund and $40 million policy fund to support new housing and fight homelessness. I sat down with Priscilla Chan, founder of the Chan-Zuckerberg Initiative, and Fred Blackwell, CEO of the San Francisco Foundation, to talk about the project in an exclusive interview.
I was really intimidated by getting involved in the housing space and really tried our best not to get involved because the problems feel so vast and beyond what any individual organization can really tackle. But what I realized working as a pediatrician and as an educator is that it is the common denominator for success. Like it is, when you look at a child who isn't getting enough sleep, their asthma isn't well controlled, they can't focus in the classroom, oftentimes it comes down to a kid not having a safe place to sleep, not having a place to store their medications, not being able to rest at home. And so I realized that all the issues that we care about in order to ensure that our children are healthy and successful really do boil down to housing. And so we spent a lot of time working with Fred, religious groups, talking to businesses, community organizers to get a sense of like, what could we actually do together and how can we leverage policy? Because like I said, we are small, we can contribute and do our best, but how can we actually build a partnership that encompasses all of the stakeholders involved in the Bay Area?
Now, some people think a small number of wealthy people shaping or architecting policy is kind of a scary thought. It works when you agree with the policy, but not so much when you don't. Why approach this as an investment fund plus a policy fund?
So we actually have had the opportunity to work closely with Fred, with CASA, with faith-based groups. So this isn't something that one individual group came up with, but really a collaborative of folks that have come together with different viewpoints and come together around some consensus about what needs to get done.
Fred, how much affordable housing will this kind of money create, and how does that compare to what the area needs?
Yeah, so, between the investment fund and the policy fund, we think that we are going to be able to produce about 8,000 units of affordable housing, but also stabilize many more households than that, because not only are we talking about supporting the production of new housing, but we're also talking about the preservation of existing affordable housing, and we have a pretty ambitious program that is about protecting those who are vulnerable to gentrification and displacement here in the Bay Area. So all of that together we think is going to have substantial impact.
You've also got businesses involved. Facebook is part of this, Genentech is part of this. Microsoft just announced a $500 million housing initiative in Seattle. Why do you think tech executives are putting their money and their muscle behind this now?
I think it's the realization that this is a problem that exists that impacts the greater community, and they want to be able to be part of building the Seattle or the Bay Area into this place that people from all different backgrounds can come and be successful. And it's also understanding that looking at opportunities like the partnership where they can be part of being a durable solution. Going at it alone is a challenging thing, and the fact that the partnership has really spent all this time defining what is possible and what the needs are. I think having all different voices and stakeholders involved is attractive for everyone. Community leaders want to know that business is involved. Business wants to know that there are folks that are really close to the problem and organizing and advocating for the long term that they can invest in. And it's that sort of collision of brilliance that's so exciting about the partnership for the Bay's future.
Fred, Amazon has been an interesting case study because we've seen Amazon have to leave Seattle to look for a second headquarters, in part because they're blamed for the housing crisis there. Meantime, you have New Yorkers not wanting Amazon to come to their city. How much is tech exacerbating the housing crisis?
It's a great question. I think one of the things that's really been interesting about our involvement in this is how the participation of the corporate sector and the tech sector more specifically has evolved. When we first started these kinds of conversations, there was a sense that these kinds of issues were somebody else's problem. And what's happening is that folks in the corporate sector and tech sector more specifically are starting to see this as a business problem. It's creating a situation where it's hard to recruit good workers. People, say a lot of times people are getting job offers here in the Bay Area, then they'll look at Zillow or they'll look at Craigslist and they'll say no thank you. And so we've really reached a point where this is not just a social problem, it's a business problem as well. And so I think that while it's taken a while, I think that the tech sector is starting to kind of absorb and take in a little bit more, not only kind of what the contribution has been to the problem, but also understanding what their contribution can be and should be to a solution.
So we use the word crisis. What happens if these policy changes don't happen? What happens if the things you're calling for don't work?
You know, the list is long, to tell you the truth. And, you know, I'll start with the corporate sector and the economy here in the Bay Area. I think that we are really on the brink of killing the goose that laid the golden egg. If the trajectory stays the way that it is right now, people are going to start making different decisions around where they're going to locate their businesses. People are going to start leaving the Bay Area because things are too expensive and the business costs are just too high.
Priscilla, you're spending 100% of your time at CZI now, right? And it's evolved considerably from when you first announced it. How difficult is it in this moment to run a philanthropy connected to the Facebook brand, given the concerns about privacy, given the concerns about data, given the pile-on that we're seeing?
Yeah, we've made tremendous progress in figuring out where our niche is at CZI in the philanthropic space. And I want to emphasize the fact that we're small compared to the fields that we're working on. And we're also not working on issues that are brand new. We're focused on science. How can we cure and prevent and manage all disease? We're focused on making sure that students have access to high quality education. We're focused on justice and opportunity, where we're really thinking about how can we unlock the opportunity that's lost in our criminal justice system, in our immigration system, in housing. And so these are big problems compared to what we're able to do in a given year.
Now, at the same time that you are trying to do all this good in the world with the wealth that Facebook has created, you have people out there blaming Facebook for a lot of bad things. They want leadership changes. How do you reconcile that?
You know, we have built an incredibly strong team at CZI. CZI and Facebook are two separate organizations. And what's happening at Facebook, Mark is working incredibly diligently on, and we have the opportunity to make sure that we internalize those lessons as well. But we have an independent organization with strong leaders that are dedicated to this work in the long term. And so we are excited about the opportunity to sort of be best in class and learn those lessons alongside Facebook while building our own organization.
At the same time, there is overlap. So Chan Zuckerberg, San Francisco General Hospital has your name on it, has Mark's name on it. You worked there. You've got politicians and nurses saying that his name should be taken off in light of the current scandals. How do you respond to that?
You know, San Francisco General Hospital is a place where I grew up as a physician, as someone that cares for families and children. I've slept innumerable nights there, rushing to the emergency room, to the delivery room, and I've seen firsthand how important that hospital is as a safety net resource to everyone in this community. And I could not be more proud and honestly honored to be able to support the work that goes on there, because I've worked alongside all of those doctors, nurses, technicians. And so I want to see that hospital succeed, and I'm willing to do what's necessary to really make sure that that community has what it needs. And, you know, we're proud to be able to put the machines into the surgery units, get the imaging units in place, because I've seen firsthand how challenging it can be when you don't have the right resources to serve our city's most vulnerable individuals.
This data issue is so important, and I know data is important to Chan Zuckerberg. It's helping your work. Can you reassure people that their data is protected, that their data isn't going back to Facebook?
Oh, well, our organizations are completely separate. There is no sharing of data. And in fact, a lot of our, we take data incredibly seriously. We have, in our education work, signed on to the gold standard of student and family privacy policies. In science, we have committed to open standards and work closely with scientific leadership to make sure that everything that we engage with is treated with the highest level of protection. And so that's a core competency that we need to be very serious about and take the responsibility very seriously. And so we have teams across the organization thinking about how to be the best stewards of this so that we can bring the promise of technology beyond, getting pizza to this office immediately. The promise of technology should really also be applied to making sure that we're advancing science, that we're allowing students to reach their highest potential, and really move the promise of technology beyond the consumer world to a place where we can have real social impact.
Priscilla Chan, founder of the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, there with Fred Blackwell, CEO of the San Francisco Foundation. Well, after almost a decade as the best-selling video game, the Call of Duty series has been bumped from the top spot. According to the NPD Group's year-end video game sales report, Red Dead Redemption 2 claimed the crown as 2018's bestseller after more than 7 years in development. Meantime, Nintendo also dominated video game sales with 6 Switch-exclusive games in the top 20. Super Smash Bros. Ultimate was the 5th best-selling game of the year after only 3 weeks on the shelf. Coming up, Google has long fostered a culture of employee inclusion, but new filings suggest the search giant may be trying to limit protections for those pushing back. We'll discuss next. This is Bloomberg. In November, Google publicly supported thousands of employees who walked out in protest of workplace policies. But 3 weeks later, the company privately pushed the U.S. government to roll back protections for these organizers. In filings obtained by Bloomberg, the search giant urged the National Labor Relations Board to undo a precedent that allows workers to use company email addresses to organize, as they did for last year's walkout. Meantime, a Google spokesperson said we're not lobbying for changes to any rules. Here to discuss, Bloomberg's Josh Idelson. So what's going on here?
So it depends on the definition of the term lobbying. But what we learned using Freedom of Information Act requests is that Google has repeatedly been asking the federal government to throw out a precedent from the Obama era that says workers have the right to organize using their employee email system. Google wants the government to go back to the George W. Bush Labor Board standard, where companies could broadly ban using your worker email account to organize and agitate about issues at work.
So who would this impact? We've had activists from Google on the show. I can recall Liz Fong Jones, a Google employee who's been very vocal about discrimination at the company. She's helped to organize employees internally. She's come on our show as a Google employee to protest and critique her own employer. Are those the kind of people we're talking about here?
Sure. The National Labor Relations Act from the New Deal protects people's ability to take collective action and to have the conversations that lead to collective action related to all kinds of workplace issues. And the precedent that Google is asking to get rid of makes clear that communicating with each other on your company employee email system is among the activities that are protected. Now, the particular labor board case where this came up actually involves a worker who's alleging he was punished for dissenting from left-wing politics at Google. So there is an issue that emerged in that case that could have the outcome of rolling back protections for progressive protesters like the ones that we saw go out by the thousands in the walkout in November.
So I want to read Google's statement in full. They say Google is one of the most open workplaces in the world. Employees have multiple internal forums to express their views, raise concerns, connect, including thousands of internal communities and tens of thousands of email groups. We're not lobbying for changes to any rules. This was a legal defense that we included as one of many possible defenses in the response to a charge. This case is without merit, and we are defending the claim vigorously. What does that mean?
So prosecutors from the National Labor Relations Board have accused Google of suppressing workers' rights through policies that Google has, through alleged threats, and through a written warning that was given to an employee, allegedly in retaliation for comments they made on internal forums. Google is saying that they're not lobbying, but that they are raising this as a defense against that charge. We have seen in other cases, like when Saks claimed in court that it would have been legal if they fired someone for being transgender, that employees and activists sometimes take what a company says in court as a very serious indication of where the company's heart is. And in this case, we've seen Google employee activists we talked to and others outside the company say it's difficult to trust Google claiming to embrace progressive protesters in the workplace when they're seeking to change the law in a way that would make it easier to punish them.
Well, it's interesting you use the word heart, because Larry and Sergey founded this company and encouraged an open dialogue among employees, but I wonder if they ever foresaw that employees could use those voices to speak out against leadership. Walk out, 20,000 employees walking out of the company in protest of sexual harassment and discrimination.
This is a fraught moment for Google. It's a company that has prided itself on the internal debate and openness and communication there, but over the past year has really been struck by foment and vocal advocacy from workers against the company's position on all kinds of issues, from Department of Defense contracts to treatment of subcontracted workers, that poses a real challenge to the company.
All right, Josh Idelson, who covers workplace issues for us, thank you so much for continuing to bring us these stories. Really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, billionaire George Soros warned of the dangers of artificial intelligence in the hands of governments like China, and called President Xi Jinping the most dangerous opponent of open societies.
China is not the only authoritarian regime in the world, but it's undoubtedly the wealthiest, strongest, and most developed in machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Soros added that China is developing a centralized database that'll use algorithms to determine whether someone poses a threat to the one-party system. Meantime, the U.S. government shutdown now in its 34th day is forcing some companies to seek alternative routes to go public. Bloomberg's Jonathan Farrow caught up with NASDAQ CEO Adena Friedman at the World Economic Forum in Davos and asked if the shutdown or macroeconomic issues instead are causing companies to hold off going public.
If we look at the beginning of last year in terms of the listing applications on file to list on NASDAQ versus at the beginning of this year, we've actually had a 35% increase in the number of listing applications wanting to come to NASDAQ at the beginning of this year, which means even despite the really good environment we had, we still have even more companies looking to tap the public market. So I would say right now in January, the reason why you're not seeing IPOs is really much more in relation to the government shutdown than it is in relation to companies sitting on the sidelines.
So the pipeline looks good. There's two big names that stand out for a lot of people this year, Lyft and Uber. Have you been speaking to them?
So we don't talk about any particular candidates, but I would say we've talked to a lot of firms from all different industries, very large companies, as well as some of the small, great innovators of our day as well. And all of them are really excited and getting themselves ready to go into the public markets. They're very focused on making sure that they're ready when the government opens, they're ready when the market is receptive.
There's an argument building on the outside, and I want your insight into it, that for Lyft and Uber, the window IPOs closing. Let's get it done in 2019. The option's not going to be there in 2020. What do you make of that?
Well, I don't think any of us can really predict the future, and I would say that companies go public when they're ready and when the market's receptive. Those are the two things that they're going to look at. And honestly, in any given environment, if strong companies can come to market, even in the volatile environment in the fourth quarter, we had some really interesting and very strong companies come to market and do quite well.
So you think if the two big names do eventually list with you guys, that'll set the tone for the rest of the other players in the private markets?
So we're happy to have every single company list on NASDAQ.
You're not going there, are you?
We're ready to have them all come our way.
Can you talk to me about the breakdown of your revenue at the moment? A couple of years ago, I think the breakdown was about 30% on volume and 70% on recurring revenues, subscription basis as well. Has that shifted over the last couple of years?
Yeah, so today it's about 25% on volume and 75% on recurring revenues. And partly that's because of the fact that the recurring revenue businesses generally are higher growth businesses for us. Yeah. And partly because of some bolt-on acquisitions we've done in these kind of subscription basis, the data and analytics and technology businesses. But the overall in the first 3 quarters of 2018, all of our businesses grew, and our volume businesses grew basically in direct relation to our non-recurring.
On the volume business, you might get a bit of competition soon. Some of the big banks are banding together to create the members exchange. What do you think about that?
Well, it's probably good to put it in context. So today there are 4 large exchange groups that trade all U.S. equities. So we trade New York stocks just like New York trades our stocks. So there are 4 large exchange groups that trade and 35 dark pools that are really single dealer platforms. So we compete very vigorously every single day. We have a lot of those clients that are signed up to do something like MEMX are also our largest clients, but they also have their own dark pools. So this is very much a co-opetition type of environment. We are very good at what we do. We're very proud of what we do. This is the 6th time our members have made an attempt to launch an exchange.
You don't sound concerned about this at all.
We're really not. We feel very ready to compete.
That was NASDAQ CEO Adena Friedman there speaking to Bloomberg's Jonathan Farrow at the World Economic Forum in Davos. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. Of course, we're live streaming on Twitter. You can check us out there at Technology and follow our global breaking news network TikTok on Twitter. I'm Emily Chang in San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.